There is a jar of honey on a shelf in a museum case in northern China that nobody has opened in over 3,000 years. It was sealed during a dynasty most people could not name if you paid them, buried with someone whose name is lost, and when conservators finally tested what was inside, it had not rotted. It had not fermented. It had not grown a single thing. It was still honey, ready to eat, sitting quietly through 3,000 years of wars, floods, and empires rising and falling around it, while nobody so much as opened the lid. Right now, in your own kitchen, you probably have a jar of something almost exactly like it that you have already decided is garbage, because a sticker on the side told you a date that has passed. You're about to find out how wrong that sticker has been the entire time. My name is Alex Wong. I trained 11 years under a master who fixed what other people threw away: appliances, locks, anything with a working part inside that the manufacturer hoped you would never bother learning yourself. For the first 3 years, he paid me almost nothing, sometimes nothing at all, and I lived above his shop on a single shelf of food I could not afford to replace every week. 22 years later, I still keep that same kind of shelf, and right now, there are 25 things sitting on it that I could leave untouched for a decade, sometimes for the rest of my life, and eat without a second thought. Here is what should bother you. The supermarket knows exactly which foods these are. The whole modern food industry has known it for decades, and it has built an entire system on you never finding out, because a pantry that does not empty is a customer who stops returning. By the end of this, you will know all 25. You will know exactly why each one survives, and you will know how to set the whole thing up this weekend for almost nothing. Let me start with the part nearly everyone has backwards, because if you do not understand this first, none of the rest will make sense to you. You have been trained to read the date stamped on a package as a verdict on safety. It is not. In nearly every case, it is a guess about peak flavor, written by a lawyer or a marketing team, not a chemist standing over a microscope. Food does not spoil because a number of days has passed. Food spoils because something alive, bacteria, mold, yeast, the enzymes already sitting inside the food itself, has water and oxygen and warmth to multiply in. Take the water away, and nothing can grow. Flood the food with enough salt or sugar to pull every drop of free water out of anything that lands on it, and nothing can grow. Push the acid low enough, or the alcohol high enough, and nothing can grow. This is the same logic I use on a job site, deciding which metal fitting will rust through in a damp basement, and which will outlast the building. You are not guessing. You are reading the conditions a thing needs to fail, and then you are removing them one at a time. Every food on this list has already had those conditions removed before it ever reached your cabinet. That is the entire secret, and there is no mystery left in it once you see the mechanism plainly. Salt is where this starts, because salt is what makes nearly everything else on the list possible. Pure rock or sea salt, kept dry and sealed, is a mineral. It was never alive, so there is nothing inside it to decay. It sits in a jar for the rest of your life doing nothing but waiting. White granulated sugar works through the same principle from the other direction, pulling water out of anything that tries to grow on it. Bone dry and sealed, sugar does not expire, it only clumps if humidity gets in, which a tightly closed jar solves completely. Honey combines both jobs at once. Almost no water content to begin with, and what little water remains locked so tightly by sugar that nothing can use it. I keep 3 jars on my own shelf, none refrigerated, the oldest past 11 years, and the only thing that has happened to it is a little crystallizing, fixed in minutes with a pan of warm water. From those 3 foundations comes everything else. My master kept a tin of quicklime in his tool drawer to pull moisture out of the air around his chisels, because dampness ruins a blade the same way it ruins a pantry, and that single habit told me more about food storage than any cookbook ever did. Keep that idea in your head, because it explains nearly every item still to come. Alcohol does the same defensive work through a different door. A spirit above roughly 40% alcohol by volume is hostile ground for almost anything that wants to grow in it. So a sealed bottle of white grain liquor or rice wine, kept out of direct light, does not expire. The flavor only shifts slowly over years, sometimes improving, the way a cask of whiskey is prized for its age rather than feared for it. Vinegar runs on the same acid logic. Distilled white vinegar or plain rice vinegar with no fruit pulp or sugar added is essentially permanent on a shelf. It may grow a harmless cloudy strand called mother over the years, which is not spoilage but the vinegar quietly reproducing itself, the same culture used to start a fresh batch. Strain it or leave it, the bottle keeps. Soy sauce belongs in this same family. A naturally brewed bottle, soybeans, wheat, salt and water, and nothing else on the label, is salted so heavily that bacteria cannot get a foothold in it, and it holds for years past anything printed on the cap, refrigerated or not. The dried goods make up the largest share of this list, and dehydration is the oldest preservation method there is, older than the can, older than the jar. White rice, dried properly and sealed against moisture and pests, lasts for decades, not years. Government emergency grain reserves have tested rice stored more than 30 years and found it still perfectly edible. Brown rice is the one exception worth naming plainly, because the oil in the bran turns rancid within a year or two, regardless of how it is stored, so if permanence is the goal, white rice is the one to keep. Dried beans and lentils harden over many years, but do not become unsafe. You only trade away some cooking speed, never your safety. Cornstarch, completely dry and free of any fat to turn rancid, is as close to inert as a kitchen ingredient gets. Baking soda will not spoil, though it slowly loses leavening strength after a year or two of air exposure. Replace it for baking if you want a full rise, but keep using the same box for cleaning and pulling odor out of a sealed container indefinitely, the way I keep an open box in my toolbox to keep a damp smell out of a closed case. Whole dried spices, peppercorns, whole chilies, star anise, cinnamon bark, cloves, kept sealed and out of direct light, do not become unsafe with age. They only lose potency slowly as their oils fade over years. Buy whole rather than ground if permanence matters, because ground spice exposes far more surface to the air and loses its strength within months instead of years. Dried mushrooms and dried kelp, fully dehydrated and salted by their own nature, hold for years with no safety concern at all, and a properly aged dried mushroom often tastes deeper than a fresh one ever did. Dried jujubes and goji berries are sugar concentrated the same way a raisin is, so little water left inside that nothing can grow, and years on a shelf do nothing to them but deepen the color. Plain dried wheat noodles, with no egg or fresh ingredient mixed in, behave exactly like any dry pasta. Years of safe storage with only a slightly drier bite once cooked. Instant coffee and loose dried tea leaves are fully dehydrated and lose aroma over time rather than becoming unsafe. I have brewed tea 4 years old that tasted flat and harmed nobody. Powdered milk, properly sealed at the point of manufacture with the moisture pulled out, has been documented by dairy research labs to remain stable for over 20 years, stored cool and dry. The protein and fat holding steady as long as no water gets back in to restart the clock. Rendered, salted lard was the cooking fat of every kitchen before refrigeration existed, and properly clarified and sealed in a jar away from heat and light. It lasts for years. Unlike a liquid vegetable oil, which turns rancid within months because of how its fat molecules are built, a solid animal fat that has been salted and clarified is remarkably stable. Salt-cured, fully dried meat or fish, made the traditional way with enough salt worked through it to pull the water out completely, was how households fed themselves through an entire season with no power at all. Properly made and kept dry, it holds for a year or more unrefrigerated and indefinitely once frozen. Fermented bean paste, kept heavily salted and sealed in its jar, is one of the most stable foods in any kitchen, developing deeper flavor over years instead of spoiling, much the same way a good vinegar improves with age rather than failing. And monosodium glutamate, a pure crystalline compound chemically no different in stability from table salt, sits in a sealed jar indefinitely, waiting to be useful and never once asking to be replaced. The last item on the list is the one people are most surprised by, and it is properly canned, commercially sealed food. A tin of beans, a tin of fish, a jar of vegetable pickled the traditional way in salt and acid. As long as the seal is intact, with no bulging, no rust through the metal, no leak anywhere along the rim, the contents are shut off from air entirely, and food agencies that have tested canned goods decades past their printed date have found them still safe to eat. The can is not counting down toward anything. The can is a vault, and the only thing that changes inside it over the years is a slow, almost unnoticeable softening of texture. Now, here is the part I need you to hear clearly, because it is the difference between this working for you and this hurting you. Every single item on this list lasts because something, dryness, salt, sugar, acid, alcohol, an unbroken seal, denies water and oxygen to anything that wants to grow. The moment that condition breaks, the clock starts running again. Wet rice grows mold within days. A jar of honey worked with a damp spoon repeatedly can ferment. And a can that is dented, bulging, or leaking is not a can anymore. It is a warning sign, and it goes straight into the bin unopened. No exception, because the one real danger hiding in this entire category is a low-oxygen bacterium that can grow inside a compromised seal, without giving off any smell or taste to warn you. I would rather lose you the satisfaction of a perfect 25-item list than have you take a risk with a can that has already failed its one job. So here is what you do this weekend, and it costs you almost nothing, because most of this is probably already sitting in your kitchen, just stored badly. Pull every dry good and sealed bottle out of every cabinet and lay it on the counter. Anything still living in a torn paper bag or thin plastic, rice, beans, sugar, salt, move it into a glass jar or a hard plastic container with a gasket lid, the kind sold cheap at any houseware stall in the market. This one move, out of paper and into something that actually seals, does more for shelf life than anything else you will do today. If you want to go further, the way my master taught me for his tool chest, drop a small cloth packet of dry rice or a few leftover silica packets from a shoebox into the jar with anything you worry about humidity reaching. It costs nothing and pulls the last bit of moisture out of the trapped air. Find a cabinet that stays cool and dark, away from the stove and away from any wall. The afternoon sun bakes through because heat is the other enemy here, and label each jar with the date you moved it. Not because the food is on a schedule, but because it is useful to know how old something is when you decide what to use first. I will not pretend there is a meeting somewhere deciding to keep this from you. It is simpler than that, and a little more discouraging. A pantry that never empties is bad for business. The entire model of the weekly grocery trip, the app reminding you your food is about to expire, the subscription box arriving whether you need it or not, depends on you believing every cabinet needs refreshing and every date stamp is a verdict. Nobody is hiding the chemistry. It is published. It sits in food agency reports almost nobody reads, the same way nobody reads the label on a tin of quicklime, sitting quietly in a tool drawer keeping rust away for free. Quiet things that work do not need an advertisement. Loud things that need replacing always find one. So this weekend, pull everything out, sort it against what I have told you, move it into something airtight, and find it a cool dark shelf instead of throwing it out because of a date a lawyer wrote. Tell me in the comments which of these 25 was already sitting in your kitchen without you knowing what you owned, and tell me the oldest thing you have ever opened and safely eaten. I want to hear what beats my 11-year jar of honey. Next time, since I have brought up cured meat, I will show you the full method from raw to finished. The salt ratio, the hanging time, the dry conditions that turn a fresh cut into something that keeps for a year, with no machine and no power involved at all. It is the natural next step from today, and it is the same method my master's family used before that shop ever owned a refrigerator. Until then, check your seals, keep things dry, and remember that a man who throws away what could have fed him for another decade has not saved himself any trouble. He has only paid for it twice.